Welcome to the bathroom of antiquity. You're waking up in a Roman villa, somewhere in the late 1st century CE. It's not your villa, but you've been loaned a guest chamber by a rather indulgent senator who believes his mosaic floors are the pinnacle of human innovation. The morning sun drizzles through a slatted window. Somewhere, a slave is sweeping fallen fig leaves off the atrium floor. A dog snores nearby, dreaming, perhaps, of dinner spilled by an unsteady patrician. You stretch, and your host calls through the doorway with unbothered cheer, "Time to cleanse your mouth." Ah, the Roman morning routine. But before we dive into that foamy mystery, allow this gentle reminder. Like, subscribe, and softly comment where you're listening from, and perhaps what your own toothpaste tastes like, especially if it doesn't involve ashes or vinegar. Now, let's begin tonight's journey. You're escorted to the balneum, a private bathing room filled with steam and soft chatter. A servant hands you a small ceramic vessel. Inside it, a fine, pale powder. You sniff. Mistake. It smells confusing. Not entirely unpleasant, but sharp, earthy, metallic, with just a hint of ammonia. Welcome to dentifricium, the Roman answer to toothpaste. More accurately, a mixture of crushed bones, powdered oyster shells, charcoal, herbs, and yes, urine. That last part wasn't a joke. The ammonia in urine was considered a powerful cleansing agent, and Romans, always eager to optimize, believed it helped whiten teeth and disinfect the mouth. Collected from public urinals, it was sold, processed, and used in both laundry and dentistry. If you're cringing now, remember, people also once used radium face cream. You dip a soft cloth into the powder. Rub your teeth gently. The texture is gritty, like scrubbing your enamel with the beach, which in some cases is exactly what it was. Historians still debate whether these powders actually helped or wore down enamel faster than you could say plaque. But one thing is certain. Roman smiles were considered important. If not for hygiene, then certainly for politics and public charm. You rinse your mouth with wine vinegar, spit into a basin shaped like a lion, and exhale. Clean, in the ancient sense, or at least scoured. Mouths, mirth, and mint that wasn't. You sit now on a smooth marble bench in the peristyle, a small courtyard ringed with columns and sun-tired vines. Your teeth feel, how to put this delicately, vigorously scrubbed. You wonder briefly if your enamel has opinions. Across from you, your Roman host reclines on a couch and offers you a handful of green leaves. "Chew this," he says. "It sweetens the breath." You take one and nibble. It's not mint. It's mastic, a resin gathered from the sap of the mastic tree, used by ancient Greeks and Romans to freshen breath and clean the mouth. Chewing it releases a bitter, pine-like flavor, earthy, aromatic, a bit like licking a spice merchant's sandal, but not unpleasant, not entirely. This was the original chewing gum. Alongside mastic, Romans also used crushed myrrh, coriander seeds, and even cinnamon bark to scent their breath. Not because they worried about cavities in the modern sense, but because fresh breath was a sign of good breeding. In polite Roman society, halitosis was considered a moral failing. There were even poems that mocked senators for having breath like boiled cabbage and old anchors. We do not know what an old anchor smells like, but it was likely not ideal. Interestingly, some wealthier citizens carried small silver breath boxes filled with perfumed herbs, A sniff here, a nibble there. It was like an ancient breath mint, minus the branding. You watch as a servant adds a few drops of rose water and vinegar to your wash basin. You swirl your fingers through it and wonder what future generations will say about your own morning routine. Perhaps someday, floss will seem barbaric. A cicada buzzes lazily in the vine. The sun spills slowly down the column beside you, and the breeze carries the faintest scent of crushed sage and lingering ammoniacal powder. Strangely, you feel minty enough. The barber-dentist and his box of unpleasant surprises. You're ushered now through a side gate into a little shop wedged between a bakery and a cloth dyer stall. It smells, how to phrase this, vivid, like warm iron, old herbs, and someone's idea of medicine mixed with someone else's idea of wine. This is your local tonstrina, a Roman barber shop. But unlike modern barbers who might trim your beard and ask about your weekend, this one also doubles as a dentist, an amateur surgeon, and, depending on the day, a gossip columnist with very sharp tools. He greets you with a cheerful grunt and gestures to a small wooden chair that looks like it's never had a good day. Laid out before him is a wooden box, hinged and worn, filled with gleaming metal instruments, tiny spoons, tweezers, sharp picks, and something that looks distressingly like pliers. You shift uneasily. He grins. Nothing to fear. You still have your teeth. Reassuring. He takes out a metal scraper used to clean the surface of the teeth, particularly after meals heavy in fish sauce or honeyed dates. Romans were nothing if not committed to flavor, and their dental tools paid the price. He also shows you a toothpick, but not the kind you know. These are long, sometimes silver, and occasionally carved into animal shapes at the end. Some were made from ivory or bird bone, and high-ranking senators would carry them around like status symbols. To clean the mouth, he prepares a rinse. Vinegar, honey, and salt, mixed with crushed peppercorns. You are meant to gargle it. You do. Barely. It tastes like a prank. Historians still debate whether Roman dentists were trained professionals or simply ambitious barbers with access to tongs. Probably both. No formal dental schools, just a strong stomach and community trust. When you leave, he offers you a bonus treatment, a pinch of ground sage leaf and a kiss from a friendly greyhound that wanders the shop floor, entirely unsupervised. You decline the dog, but take the sage, because your mouth, despite everything, feels slightly fresher, and your sense of history, oddly, sharper.
Toothbrushes that weren't, and the power of the finger. Now that you've been thoroughly scraped, scrubbed, gargled, and given questionable herbal advice, it's time to explore a surprising detail. The Romans didn't really have toothbrushes, at least not in the way we imagine them. Instead, they used a combination of cloth, sticks, and, most reliably, their fingers. Yes, fingers. The Roman method of dental hygiene was delightfully direct. Take your preferred cleaning powder, bone ash, crushed shell, myrrh, maybe a dash of charcoal, and rub it onto your teeth using your index finger. Circular motion. Gentle, ideally. Some manuals suggest moistening the powder with water or oil, but others insist on spit for authenticity. You are offered a fresh linen square and a little bowl of powder that smells faintly of fennel and yesterday's fireplace. You try the finger method. It's gritty. Effective? Maybe. Intimate? Definitely. You've never been more aware of your molars. For those who desired more refinement or bragging rights, some used chew sticks made from aromatic twigs like mastic, olive, or juniper. One end was chewed until it frayed into a brush-like texture, while the other remained firm to scrape or stir powders. The wealthier might carve theirs from ivory or gold, because even tooth cleaning could be a fashion statement. And yet, despite the lack of bristles or ergonomic handles, Romans took oral cleanliness seriously. A bright smile was not just attractive, but a signal of discipline, especially for orators whose mouths were their most valuable instrument. One account even tells of a famed speaker who would fast before speeches, not for purity of mind, but to avoid garlic breath. Historians still debate whether these methods led to fewer cavities or just better breath, but Roman skeletons suggest their teeth held up reasonably well, perhaps thanks to a lower sugar diet and a constant supply of wine-based rinses. You finish your finger cleaning, spit gently into a stone basin. A breeze wafts past carrying the scent of rosemary and fish sauce. You've survived another Roman dental ritual. Barely.
Breath of the Senate, politics, perfume, and dental etiquette. Today, you're invited to the Roman Forum, not to speak or trade, but to observe a peculiar phenomenon, the intersection of oral hygiene and political theater. The Forum, you soon realize, smells surprisingly pleasant. Not of flowers or incense, but of herbs, wine vinegar, and something subtly sweet. That's not coincidence. It's by design. You watch as senators gather, their robes crisp, their sandals polished, their mouths meticulously prepared. Before every public appearance, especially speeches, many Roman officials adhered to a grooming routine that included teeth cleaning, breath sweetening, and even the application of perfumed wax to the lips. A senator beside you unwraps a tiny bronze case. Inside, a rolled cloth soaked in rose oil and crushed fennel. He dabs it under his tongue. Then chews a sliver of cinnamon bark like it's the most serious task he'll do all day. You ask why. He says, one's breath should not distract from one's ideas. Makes sense? There was even a cultural saying, os fotidum mens turbidum. A foul mouth reveals a troubled mind. Though historians aren't sure whether it was meant literally or metaphorically. Even Cicero, famed orator and tireless critic, once remarked in his writings about the clear-tongued eloquence of a rival, not cleverness, freshness. To achieve this, some orators rinsed with honeyed wine just before entering the Senate floor. Others rubbed their gums with mint and crushed alum to create a tingling effect, believing it sharpened both tongue and wit. You're offered a pre-speech rinse. It tastes like someone tried to make perfume into soup. You nod politely, trying not to wince. Nearby, a scroll seller boasts about his own blend, coriander, sage, and crushed pearl, and insists it can cure both bad breath and social embarrassment. You do not test this theory. But one thing is clear. In ancient Rome, the mouth was not just a tool, it was a political asset. Marketplace mint and the curious trade in breath-freshening goods. The day grows warmer, and you find yourself meandering through the stalls of a bustling Roman marketplace, not to shop for grain or sandals, but to explore a rather niche section of commerce, oral care and cosmetic curiosities. You hadn't planned to spend your morning comparing ancient breath fresheners, and yet, here you are, watching a merchant enthusiastically wave bundles of dried herbs like he's casting a spell. For the tongue and the soul, he shouts. He's selling mouth sachets, tiny woven packets filled with anise, thyme, mint, and clove. The idea? Tuck it in your cheek while you go about your day. Let your saliva do the steeping. The result? an herbally infused freshness that made you more tolerable in conversation, especially in crowded bathhouses and family dinners. You pick one up. It smells faintly like a well-traveled drawer. Next to him, another vendor sells tiny amphoras of concentrated rinse, sometimes vinegar-based, sometimes wine, often laced with salt and wormwood. The labels are beautifully painted. The taste, you're told, is less beautiful. But it's not just rinses in satchels. You see a man carving toothpicks from olive wood, some plain, others elaborately shaped into dolphins, gladiators, and even mythological creatures. One boasts a handle shaped like Bacchus, holding a goblet and looking entirely unbothered. In another corner, a woman sells chew sticks soaked in rose oil and myrrh, bundled in silk. Wealthy ladies, she says, keep them in silver tubes and use them discreetly between dinner courses. There's even an early form of mouth perfume, small vials of aromatic oil dabbed just beneath the nose to mask offensive odors, yours or others, a form of passive-aggressive etiquette. Historians still debate how widespread these products were, whether they were luxury items for the elite or trickled into the daily habits of common citizens. But archaeological finds suggest at least some Romans were very committed to the olfactory reputation of their mouths. You leave the market with a sachet in your pocket, a chew stick in your teeth, and a newfound appreciation for the ancient Roman fear of smelling faintly like fish sauce. Dinner parties, garlic, and the etiquette of ancient breath. Evening falls, and you find yourself reclining at a triclinium, a Roman dining couch, surrounded by elegantly draped citizens, elaborate silver platters, and one very stern server guarding a plate of olives like it's state property. Tonight's meal is extravagant. There are boiled snails, honey-glazed dormice, and a sauce made of fermented fish guts that's far more prestigious than it sounds. Naturally, this raises a question. What happens to one's breath after dinner? The answer arrives before dessert. A slave discreetly passes around a small box filled with what looks like tony chalk pellets. These are compressed lozenges of baking soda, crushed coriander, and mint oil, a post-meal ritual meant to neutralize the aftertaste of luxury. Guests pop them like candy. You follow suit. Your mouth now tastes vaguely of licorice and sea foam. Not bad. Then someone breaks the code. One guest, young, brash, overconfident, arrives late and sits down with the air of a man who's just discovered his own reflection. He accepts no mint pellet. Instead, he launches into a loud story involving hunting, conquest, and what can only be described as garlic-forward breath. The room reacts with polite horror. The host raises an eyebrow. A lady faints delicately into her pomegranate. Why such drama? Because in Roman social circles, bad breath was more than impolite. It was a sign of low breeding or disregard for others. The Roman poet Martial wrote several epigrams specifically mocking those who neglected their breath, even going so far as to suggest that some men should only speak to the wind. One satirist claimed garlic breath was a crime against Jupiter. And garlic, though revered for strength and flavor, was often associated with soldiers and manual laborers, not dinner parties in marble villas. You sip your wine. Someone discreetly places an herb bundle near the offender's elbow. He does not notice. Historians still debate whether such breath mints were common across the classes or reserved for the elite. What's clear is that the olfactory etiquette of dining mattered as much as the menu.
You recline a bit deeper into the couch, eyes half-lidded, belly warm from honey cakes, and let the quiet hum of polite conversation float around you, herb-scented, carefully curated, and entirely Roman.
Tooth trouble and the whispered world of Roman remedies. You awake the next morning with a new sensation, not unlike someone having tapped your molars repeatedly with a bronze stylus. To put it plainly, toothache. Your host notices your wincing over breakfast and offers a sympathetic nod. "Ah," he says, "a restless tooth." Restless, that's one way to put it. In the ancient Roman worldview, dental pain was often believed to be caused by imbalanced humors, mischievous winds trapped in the gums, or, if you asked Pliny the Elder, perhaps even tiny invisible worms. Yes, really, some texts refer to the concept of toothworms, tiny critters thought to bore holes in teeth while you slept. Science has since said otherwise, but back then, belief shaped the remedy. Your host calls for his house medicus, who arrives holding a small pouch of tools and an expression that says, "I've done worse things before lunch." The first step? Poultices. You're offered a compress made from roasted leek, fig sap, and crushed mouse bones. The bones are optional, he assures you. You decline with enthusiasm. Then come the rinses. Today's blend includes warm vinegar, goat's milk, and a pinch of pepper. It's as soothing as it sounds, which is to say, not very. There's also a whisper remedy. A slave leans in and murmurs that his grandmother once cured a toothache by spitting through a ring made of boar's tusk under a full moon. You thank him politely, and do not ask follow-up questions. If things grew dire, extraction was an option, but not one taken lightly. Roman forceps were large, primitive, and often made of bronze or iron. There were no numbing agents, just courage, wine, and a willingness to shout. Still, not all treatments were painful. Some priests recommended blessing the mouth with sacred words, or pressing amulets made of amber against the cheek. Healing, they claimed, came not from pressure, but from harmony. Historians still debate the effectiveness of these treatments, though some poultices, particularly those with clove or willow, may have provided real relief, thanks to mild analgesic properties. You, however, choose a gentler path. A warm cloth, a sip of honeyed wine, and the reassurance that this too, like most aches, shall pass. You sit by the window, rubbing your jaw gently, and watch a child across the courtyard chase a pigeon. It's a good distraction. Even in ancient Rome, sometimes the best remedy is stillness. The tooth, the temple, and the gods who heard your ache. Later that afternoon, your host's sister, an intelligent woman with a sharp eye for scandal and sandal stitching, invites you on a walk to one of Rome's lesser-known healing shrines. You follow her through winding streets, past bronze statues and garlands strung between balconies, until you arrive at a small temple to Salus, the Roman goddess of health and public well-being. Less famous than Venus, less stern than Mars, but with far more requests for jaw pain and suspicious lumps. Inside, it's quiet, cool. Offerings line the altar, bundles of herbs, carved teeth made of ivory and wax, and tiny clay figurines showing mouths with suspiciously detailed gums. There's even a child's rattle, left behind in what must have been an act of gratitude or hope, or both. Your hostess kneels, closes her eyes, and whispers something soft. You follow, not entirely sure what's expected. A priest appears, robed, calm, and faintly fragrant of thyme and laurel, and he blesses a cup of spring water infused with bay leaf and sage. You are to rinse, spit onto a leaf, and bury it near the temple's steps, so that the pain may sink into the earth. It's poetic, possibly also vaguely unhygienic, but the ritual brings calm. There's a rhythm to it, the coolness of stone beneath your knees, the repetition of whispered incantations, the belief that someone or something is listening. Romans didn't just treat pain with medicine, they treated it with symbolism. Historians still debate whether temple visits were common for dental complaints or reserved for more dramatic maladies, but archaeological finds confirm the presence of votive teeth, small sculptures offered in thanks for healing or in plea for it. Some were quite beautiful, others ambitious. Outside the temple, a vendor offers you a blessed tooth amulet carved from coral. It's meant to scare away tooth demons. You're not sure whether it's working, but you feel mildly braver wearing it. As you stroll back toward the villa, evening folding softly over the rooftops, you realize something odd. The ache has lessened. Whether it was the sage water or simply a walk in good company, your mouth and mood feel lighter.
Children, chalk, and the first lessons in tooth care. You awake the next morning to the cheerful chaos of children racing across the villa's central courtyard. They are squealing with the kind of glee only possible before the burden of politics or poor dental decisions. Today, you're told, is Education Day, a weekly occasion when the youngest members of the household are taught basic hygiene, etiquette, and yes, how to take care of their teeth. You trowed the group into a shaded room filled with clay tablets, little wooden styluses, and a tutor who looks like he hasn't smiled in 20 years. But he takes dental matters seriously. He begins with a story, because Roman education often blended myth, morals, and mildly terrifying metaphors. Once, the tutor begins, a lazy boy ignored his mother's herbal powders. He laughed at her rinse of vinegar and thyme. And what happened? He pauses dramatically. His teeth fell out and were used by wolves to mark territory. The children gasp. You raise an eyebrow. The tutor smirks. He's got their attention. Next comes demonstration. Each child receives a linen cloth and a pinch of powdered chalk mixed with dried mint and sage. Under careful instruction, they rub their little teeth in circles, occasionally making dramatic gagging noises, which earns them mild reprimands. You're offered a cloth as well. Peer pressure is eternal. What's striking is the ritual nature of it. This isn't just brushing, it's identity. Clean teeth are a sign of a respectable family, an early Roman ideal of dignity, self-control, and public readiness. Roman parents, especially among the wealthier classes, taught children to chew mastic after meals, avoid too much honeyed pastry, though temptation was everywhere, rinse with water after salted fish or wine, and, curiously, never sleep with a full belly or an unbrushed tongue, as dreams turn sour. Historians still debate whether these rules were universally applied, but Roman texts suggest an emphasis on discipline, even in the smallest things, including how to spit gracefully into a basin. The session ends with laughter and a fig treat, soft, sweet, and just sticky enough to undo all their hard work. The tutor sighs. This too is tradition. And as the children scatter into sunbeams and dust motes, you find yourself chewing thoughtfully on a sage sprig, quietly impressed by how ancient minds wrapped health in stories and routines.
Love letters and mouths that didn't offend. The sun is now low, casting long golden beams across marble columns. You find yourself seated beside a young Roman poet, earnest, tousled, and perpetually heartbroken, who insists that oral hygiene is central to romantic success. You sip your spiced wine. He nods solemnly. A kiss should never smell like a fishmonger's stall. This is not merely personal preference, it's poetic principle. Roman love poetry is full of references to fresh breath, sweet mouths, and the offense of garlic. Catullus, for example, Rome's patron saint of heartbreak, famously penned verses mocking a rival whose breath was as rotten as wild boar. Ovid, more gently, advised lovers to rinse with myrrh and wine before their nightly declarations. You glance down at the table, a bowl of date paste, a twig brush, and what appears to be a handwritten recipe for lover's rinse. You pick it up. It reads, 3 drops of rose oil, a pinch of cinnamon ash, vinegar from a jar opened under moonlight, and 1 whispered compliment to the goddess Venus. You try not to smile. It's half beauty regimen, half incantation. The poet demonstrates. He swishes dramatically, flutters his lashes, and recites a line from his latest ode. It involves stars, longing, and molars polished like temple marble. Historians still debate how seriously Romans took these rituals, but we do know that breath and attraction were intimately linked. Bad breath wasn't just inconvenient, it was disqualifying. One ancient medical text recommends smelling one's own hand after speaking into it to test readiness for courtship. Another suggests chewing laurel leaves before a kiss to invite sweetness and good favor. As the sky turns lilac and the city hums with distant flutes, the poet offers you a sprig of mint and a caution. A clever mouth is nothing if it's foul. You nod and accept the mint. Because in this city of statues, forums, and love letters left on steps, a sweet mouth opens many doors.
Baths, barbers, and the daily ritual of mouth maintenance. It's a new morning in Rome, and as is customary, you're summoned to the public baths. Not only for cleanliness, but for conversation, gossip, business, and surprisingly, dental care. The air is thick with steam and rosemary. You're greeted by a barber, or tonsor, not just a shaver of beards, but a multitasker of bodily maintenance. Today, he's prepared to clean your nails, trim your hair, and yes, tend to your teeth. Barbers in ancient Rome often doubled as basic dental assistants. Not dentists, those were rare and terrifying, but something closer to a neighborhood fixer. The man sets out his tools: bronze scrapers, linen cloths, a cup of salt water infused with myrrh, and what looks like a long, thin spoon. You eye it suspiciously. He grins. Do scoop the tongue, always the tongue first. He gently scrapes yours, murmuring about the buildup of mouth shadows. You try not to laugh. He does not. He is very serious about hygiene folklore. Then comes a tooth rub, a powder mixed fresh from ground oyster shells, bay leaf ash, and a few dried rose petals. It's oddly fragrant. You're instructed to moisten it with your own saliva, no surprise there, dab it on your finger, and massage it over your molars. You do as told. It tastes like the ocean had feelings. Afterward, he offers a quick rinse with lukewarm wine, claiming it blesses the gums. A few nearby bathers smirk at the phrase. They've heard it a dozen times, but they still line up for their turn. What you realize, reclining in your tepidarium robe, is that this isn't just maintenance, it's ritual. For the average Roman citizen, the bathhouse was a place to reset, to cleanse, restore, and prepare yourself for public presence. A clean mouth, like a shaved chin or oiled skin, was part of the performance. It said, I am ready to be seen, heard, and smelled respectfully. Historians still debate whether barbers genuinely improved dental health or just made everything smell better. But their role was undeniable. They were hygiene gatekeepers, gossip brokers, and occasional agony uncles. You leave the baths lighter, fresher, possibly glowing. Even your molars feel
socially acceptable.
Mouth charms, folk beliefs, and the hidden superstitions of the smile. Later that day, as you pass through a quiet district near the Aventine Hill, you're waved over by a woman seated beside a basket of tiny amulets. Her name is Calpurnia. She's a charm seller, midwife, and self-proclaimed expert in oral misfortunes. You sit beside her out of curiosity, or perhaps fate, and she begins to share. The mouth, she says, is a doorway. Spirits slip through it, so we guard it. She shows you her wares: carved bone teeth strung on red thread, polished stones with symbols etched in charcoal, and what looks like a dried lizard foot wrapped in linen. You do not ask about the lizard. You are not ready. One of her most popular items? Mouth protection charms meant to prevent the entering of sour words and the exiting of unkind ones. Mothers buy them for their children, lovers for each other, and soldiers wear them before delivering reports to temperamental generals. Calpurnia insists some of Rome's great speakers wore lead discs etched with stars around their necks to protect their tongue from trembling mid-sentence. And though you suspect some exaggeration, you like the image of Cicero clutching a charm before entering court. She also describes the ritual of kissing the gate, touching your lips to your own palm and breathing into it before a journey to ensure your words would land well wherever you traveled. Superstition or poetry? Hard to say. Historians still debate how prevalent these folk customs were across class lines, but the archaeological record is sprinkled with odd amulets and annotated curse tablets that mention the mouth specifically, some intended to silence, others to sweeten. Calpurnia offers you a charm carved from olive wood, shaped like a closed mouth. She tells you to sleep with it under your pillow. It listens while you dream and bites nightmares in half. You leave her with lighter pockets and a slightly heavier satchel, wondering if maybe, just maybe, Romans understood that what leaves the mouth can echo far beyond the moment. As twilight creeps along the terracotta rooftops, you gently press the charm to your lips and whisper something you hope it keeps. The gilded smile, dentures, disguises, and the illusion of good teeth. As the stars blink into place above the forum, your evening companion, a retired actor named Lucius, invites you to a small gathering of thespians and storytellers. Over figs and laughter, the conversation turns, of all things, to false teeth. Lucius grins and taps his own. You hear a click. They're not mine, he chuckles, but they play the part. It turns out that dentures, or at least their ancestors, were known to the Romans. They were rare, expensive, and mostly ornamental. Some were crafted from human or animal teeth held together with gold wire, while others relied on ivory, shaped carefully and wedged in place. They weren't practical for chewing, but they made a statement, especially in a society that equated dental beauty with moral integrity. In Lucius's line of work, appearance was everything. A smooth white smile helped him play lovers, orators, emperors. A missing tooth meant a downgrade to dying peasant or comic relief. So when he lost a molar in a dramatic fig-eating incident, he commissioned a replacement tooth carved from pearl. It didn't match, he admits, but under torchlight, no one could tell. You ask how he kept it clean. He laughs and pulls out a small pouch. Inside, a tiny brush made of hedgehog bristles, a sliver of pumice stone, and a vial of mint oil, his personal regimen. You can lie with your words, but your mouth will always tell the truth. There's a nod of agreement around the table. Another actor shares that wealthy matrones sometimes wore tooth covers of thin silver to hide decay or discoloration, especially at feasts where one might be seated next to a senator or, worse, a poet. Historians still debate whether these early dentures were used beyond high-status individuals or actors, but the evidence, fragments of gold dental bridges and oddly human-shaped ivory, suggests at least some Romans went to impressive lengths to preserve the illusion of dental dignity. Lucius raises a toast to teeth, ours, borrowed, or imagined. And as you sip your wine beneath the oil lamps and lemon trees, you realize the ancient world understood something modernity often forgets. Sometimes beauty is just well-maintained illusion, and sometimes that's enough.
The end of the day and the mouth at rest. Night now blankets Rome. Not in silence, this city never quite sleeps, but in a gentle hum. The distant murmur of fountains, a cart's soft rattle down a distant street, and above, the coo of doves nested high among chipped statuary and ivy-covered colonnades. You return to your guest chamber, lit only by a flickering oil lamp shaped like a dolphin. There's a basin waiting, carved from stone, cool to the touch. A folded cloth, a sprig of thyme tucked beside a small cup of salt water. It's the nightly ritual. You dip your fingers, raise the water to your mouth and rinse slowly. The salt stings slightly. The thyme calms it, a gentle balance like everything here. Beside your bed is a small wooden box containing your borrowed toothpick, an olive twig, smoothed and softened by hours of use. You've learned to carve with it, clean with it, fidget with it when conversations go too long. It has become, oddly, a friend. Tonight, the household is quiet. You hear a slave quietly lighting the final lantern in the atrium. A dog barks once, then curls up by the hearth. Somewhere in the garden, cicadas began their long, drawn-out lullaby, high, soft, rhythmic. And your mouth, after its long day of figs and fables, begins to rest. In Rome, the day begins and ends at the mouth. Food, conversation, song, secrets. All of it passes through this small, vital space. And in a world before floss and fluoride, before Novocaine and smiling selfies, the Romans still knew the mouth was sacred. Historians still debate whether these rituals truly cleaned teeth or merely comforted souls, but perhaps that was the point. Care, after all, is a kind of belief. You lie back on your low bed, the olive wood charm from Calpurnia tucked beneath your pillow. It smells faintly of resin, of safety. Above you, the frescoed ceiling shows stars and birds in flight. Someone once painted it to feel like open sky, so that even indoors the soul could stretch. And so you stretch, just a little. Your eyes begin to close. Your jaw relaxes. No speeches to give, no charms to carry, just the quiet ancient knowledge that your breath is sweet, your words are spent, and your teeth, be they yours, carved, gilded, or imagined, have done their work. You've walked in sandals along bathhouse stones, rinsed with wine, whispered into charms, and smiled into starlight. Now, you rest. The oil lamp fades, its last flickers painting lazy shadows on the wall. Your breath has slowed. The room, once full of curious things and whispered superstitions, now feels softer, smaller, like a cocoon folded around sleep itself. Outside, Rome breathes too, quiet and broad, like a lion settling in marble fur. The courtyards rest, the fountains gurgle softer, and even the fig trees seem to
exhale. There's nothing more to do now, nothing more to clean or sip or wonder about. The day has done what days do. It arrived, it surprised, and now it slips away behind dark velvet curtains. In the cradle of this city, beneath a painted ceiling and behind a door that doesn't quite close, you're held by time. Not the sharp kind that hurries you, the other kind, the sleepy kind, the kind that sits beside you and hums. You stretch one last time, the sheets a little cool at your feet, your tongue heavy with quiet. There are no more herbs to chew, no more verses to recite, just this stillness, just this moment. Tomorrow will come, as it always does, with new rituals and gentle absurdities, but tonight belongs to rest, and your smile, however Roman, however real, is safe, tucked between dreams and lavender-scented linen. Sleep now. The history can wait.